Hello and welcome back to the channel where, if you are in the market for a new luxury saloon car, you're in luck because there are two which have just been very heavily updated. One is the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, that sort of archetypal luxury saloon car, and the other is Bentley's rather fabulous Flying Spur. Now there are more as well, but we'll come to that in a minute. The question is, which is the world's best luxurious four-door?
So let's take a look at them both inside and then see what they're like to drive. And we'll start with the new Mercedes S-Class.
Okay, so welcome to the all-new Mercedes-Benz S-Class, which comes in short or long wheelbase forms, but at the moment in this spec, which is 105 grand, for reasons I'll come on to later, it comes in long wheelbase form only. So I'm in my driving position, but there's actually loads of head and legroom behind me as well, and it is a cabin which is dominated by these two big screens to the expense of a lot of other separate buttons. Now, that gives you certain advantages. There's a lot of room in here, there's also a lot of room in there, but what it does mean is that all of the functions are basically through a touchscreen, and you may know how we feel about putting too much on a touchscreen. And also, this is the latest S-Class, so there is loads that you can get through. So if I just push the home screen, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different menus in there, sub-menus in there to go through to change everything from the ambient lighting through to, and actually this is quite good, the 3D/2D effect on the dashboard, which can have a million different effects of its own. There is a lot to think about in here, and that doesn't always mean, I don't think, that it's ergonomically for the benefit of the driver. More physical buttons would be handy, and yes, it would look less clean, but also mean these vents weren't out of reach. And I just think the reason we're here, in part, is because the Tesla rocked up with a massive screen front and centre, and people have gone, that's gone down quite well, we should have that. There are ergonomic limitations with huge screens, and Mercedes-Benz, the Benz patent Motorwagen was from 1885, 1886, and in the last 135 years, Mercedes-Benz has got quite good at making functional interiors, and there are things worth keeping about them. So I like this car so far, but there are things that I would just rather have as old-fashioned, even if they seem old-fashioned physical buttons. But let's go and see what it's like to drive. And so the S-Class to drive. Now, some people at Bentley would get a little bit sniffy about the idea of comparing these two cars, because they would say, well, look, you know, the Bentley is a luxury car and the Mercedes really is only an executive car, and we operate in two different spheres. And when it comes to this particular car, well, they may have a bit of a point, because instead of a big lusty petrol engine, if you look at the back of this, it says 400D, because it has a straight 6 diesel, which is more common in a car like this, but is not the full spec luxury version of the S-Class. We did have one booked, but another magazine managed to damage it before it arrived to us, which is why we've got this one. But I think, no matter, this is the archetypal engine for an S-Class. An easygoing, long-ranged, I filled it with diesel earlier this morning, it's saying it's got 550 miles. This is the kind of car that is meant to just sit and waft away 1,000 miles. Hundreds of miles in a day, absolutely no bother, leaving you calm and unruffled and unfocused. And for example, hey Mercedes, I'm stressed.
Maybe the program will help you enjoy it. I will turn it on.
Maybe it will. I now have cat paws massaging my back, and oh, I don't know if you can hear that. It's playing whales singing, and there's a sort of thing on the screen which, actually I don't think there should be a sort of moving bubbly type thing on the screen. It seems to have gone away again. Now, hey Mercedes, I'm no longer stressed.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again, please?
Hey Mercedes, I'm not stressed.
I'm sorry, but I can't help you with it right now.
Hey Mercedes, cancel the stress thing. You see, now I'm stressed. Now I'm stressed. Cancel the stress thing.
I'm sorry, but I can't help you with it right now.
No. No, you can't. No, you can't. Right, away from... Let's try and shut that up, right? Right, away from the ridiculous stress stuff, there's a lot going on in this car, and there's still a lot going on when you're driving as well as when you're stationary, and there's a lot to look through. There's a lot going on in terms of electronics, in terms of functions, but fundamentally at heart, beneath all of that stuff, there is a sound car in here. This engine just mooches into the background. You can occasionally get a bit of a diesel grumble if you just, accelerate hard, but it's got response, it's got quietness, it's got all the things you could realistically want from an engine like this. And the ride is quiet, and the ride is isolated, and the steering is direct and accurate enough. I'm really tired of the cat paw thing on my back about now. It's so irritating. It's so irritating. But I just wish a few more things were rather more straightforward to use. So the entertainment volume, sometimes, I've been going up and down on it, and sometimes I just get it a bit wrong. I do a flick and it goes up, or it goes down the other way to which I want, or it doesn't move at all. And then, therefore, it's easier to do that. That shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case that it's easier to reach there than it is to flick something on here. And although the climate buttons are always visible, they are there, which requires something more significant movement-wise than it would be if they were just on a dial. And that sort of stuff is the sort of stuff that I shouldn't be complaining about in 2021. I know cars have a lot of technology, but it shouldn't be that hard to use it. But fundamentally, beneath it all, this is a really capable car, and it's actually quite enjoyable to drive in its own way, as well as being refined and smooth and quiet. Although this isn't one of the high-spec petrol versions, I have driven one which has active rear steer. This does not, and it really makes it feel even more agile again. So if you're starting to spend the kind of money that would get you into the Bentley with one of these, you do get a car that feels more agile than this, and also has a much nicer sounding petrol engine than this. It's a good car, the S-Class. I like this car, and in the back there is a lot of room. Whether you prefer this or the Bentley in the back, I think largely comes down to which you would rather be seen in. They both have stacks of room, they're both quite comfortable. I think in the Mercedes, I would think people would assume I was being taken to an airport, and in the Bentley perhaps they would assume I was being taken to the opera. That's pretty much the difference. They're both really comfy and really spacious. But my interest, and probably your interest as well, is kind of what they're like as drivers' cars. And as it goes, if you can look past all of the fripperies, some of which are great, some of which are not so great, the S-Class is a really comfortable, capable, impressive car, and I wish the massage would now stop. Hey Mercedes, turn off the seat massage.
I'm switching off the massage for you.
You see? Maybe I'll bond with it after all. But right, that's enough of this. I'll jump out, jump into the Bentley, give it a little walk around the cabin of there, and then go for a drive and come to a conclusion. Okay, so welcome to the interior of the Flying Spur. Yet another week, another Bentley video. You will find elsewhere on this channel, either in a panel above my head, or we'll link it down below, a Bentayga versus Range Rover group test. There is also a video on the base V8 Flying Spur, which we did, which this one isn't. This is the full fat W12. Not just that, it's the first edition, which gets extra kit and is even more expensive again. So it's about twice the money as the Mercedes-Benz that we've got. And also, by the way, I didn't realise I was going to clash/compliment the interior leather when I got dressed this morning, but the shop's open again soon and I'll get a new hoodie. However, this is largely a beautifully finished interior. Material quality is high on the wood/leather front, mixed with some slightly older feeling buttons and switchgear, for good and bad. The bad thing, all right, if you have this many buttons, obviously you get a bit less space in the dashboard. I get these two cup holders, a little charge pad there, and this armrest slides, but it doesn't go up and down, so there's less storage space. It looks a little more cluttered than the S-Class does. On the plus side, there are actual physical buttons for doing stuff. So if I want to change the temperature, I don't have to look away from the road for very long. It does have a screen. It's not the latest generation Volkswagen screen even, so it doesn't look and feel as nice as the Mercedes one. But in terms of functionality, it's got everything that I need, and less than the Mercedes, I grant you, in terms of changing the ambient lighting, and I can't tell it I'm stressed and it won't play whale music at me. But I don't necessarily need all that. What it feels like is a nice driving environment. So let's go and see what it's like to drive. And so to the Bentley to drive. Now, first thing to note that because this has got a W12 cylinder petrol engine with an awful lot of power, this is a very, very fast car. I don't think you would necessarily think to yourself, oh, the S-Class is a bit underpowered. I mean, these are big luxury / executive saloon cars. Neither of them is a supercar, so I don't think you would say either of them are down on power, but there's only so fast you want to go in a 2.x ton 5.3 metre long luxury saloon. But there's no question that this engine is more befitting of a car of its price, but then it's a lot more expensive than the S-Class that we have. It's not as quite as smooth as this W12. It's got 12 cylinders, but it's never quite as smooth as a V12 because that has 6 cylinders in line. They are perfectly in balance, and a W12 is never quite the same, but it is quiet at a cruise, and if you back off and you want to accelerate and get it to make some noise, just make quite a nice noise while it's at it. The way it goes with Bentley's large saloons, I mean, I'm kind of inclined to think that usually the V8 is preferable. It's a bit lighter in the nose. It makes a very pleasant noise, no worse than the W12's noise. Maybe not as smooth and maybe not as fast, but actually that suits it rather well. And the rest of the driving experience is, I think, kind of where you would want a Bentley to be. It's more driver focused, I think, is probably the kindest and most accurate way of putting it, than the S-Class. What's really impressive about the S-Class is the amount of isolation it has from the road. The road ride, they're both on air springs, the road ride in this is noisier, and also you feel lumps and bumps more. This first edition car gets 22-inch wheels, which will have something to do with that, but it feels more keyed in to the ground. I think in the context of a Bentley, that's probably okay. If we were talking about something like a Rolls-Royce Ghost, it would be different. Now, my first mention of the Rolls-Royce Ghost, it would be nice, would it not, especially as I'm driving near Chichester, just 3 or 4 miles away from the factory, to have a Rolls-Royce Ghost in this test. I thought it would be. Perhaps you thought it would be too. Rolls-Royce decided it wouldn't be. They don't really like giving their cars up for tests like this because they make the argument that, well, our buyers do not make objective decisions like that. They don't decide which is better. They just decide that they want the Rolls-Royce and they buy them. That may well be true, but I think it would be an interesting comparison to make, and I don't think the Ghost would come out of it badly. That's the interesting thing. It's a really nice car. But the Bentley has the sort of character that Bentley has developed intentionally, and I think it suits this car. The steering is that bit heavier than in the Mercedes. It feels that bit more accurate, that bit more responsive, and I think it suits it rather well. And when it comes to luxury, well, there's all the bright work and the stitching and the wood, which is veneered really painstakingly, likewise with the leather, which is only garnered from bulls because they don't get stretch marks like cows, and only when they live in huge Spanish fields with no barbed wire around so that they don't get any marks on them. That sort of stuff goes, Bentley goes to town in a way that a mainstream manufacturer like Mercedes-Benz, and let's call them a mainstream manufacturer, you can get an A-Class for a couple of £100 a month. Bentley goes to the lengths that Mercedes-Benz does not. This stitching, for example, on the steering wheel is done by hand, and each of the needle workers has their own little fork, and they go around and they prick the leather around the edge of the steering wheel, and that tells you how far away all these little points should be. And each individual needleworker has their own fork, so they'll all be different on each individual wheel, which I think is quite cool. That level of attention to detail and craft is evident, and it really It really shows in here, and it really counts. And then, well, you heard me sell the Mercedes-Benz. I was a bit stressed, and in part it was what the Mercedes doing that was making me stressed. If I'm in a car like this and I think, oh, I'm a bit stressed, I just push that button there, and around it goes, and I just get 3 plain dials. When it comes to luxury, I think this stuff matters. I think this stuff is important. The world is stressing me out. I'm in my Bentley, maybe I'm in the front, maybe I'm in the back, but I want some time on my own. I just want time away from stuff. I've still got the nav here if I want it. I can still change the media if I want it, but I don't have to have this raft of information coming at me in my face. And what is luxury if it is not choice and time and the ability to say, I'm not interested. I don't want to know. Just, I want to switch off. Somebody else can deal with stuff because I'm too important and I'm too busy and I just want to relax for a while. I'm switched off. I have a luxury lifestyle. Somebody else can do that and I don't want to. And that's what I really like about this car, even though it is less isolated than the Mercedes, even though I think it's noisier than the Mercedes, even though it's less comfortable, if you want to put it that way, than the Mercedes. I find it more relaxing for that reason. And that doesn't go away if you choose one of the more expensive S-Class models. Fundamentally, the cabin architecture is the same in these. And likewise, if you come down the range in the Bentley and you don't have these first edition headrests, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend anyway, you could still have the V8. You could have a plainer, cheaper Flying Spur for the same money that you get a more expensive S-Class, and the same things would apply. This feels more like a luxury saloon, and for me, that makes it, despite the fact that dynamically there's swings and roundabouts, despite the fact that, yeah, the Mercedes has lots of kit, for me, it's the finish and the involvement in a car like a Bentley which makes this my choice.